Hello and welcome to Bud's RPG Review, where I give my thoughts on role-playing games, card games and board games. Today's review is 5 Torches Deep for D&D 5th Edition and OSR by Sigil Stone Publishing. Okay, first a bit of history. Originally kickstarted in 2019, 5 Torches Deep is available as a 48-page softback print-on-demand and PDF that is presented in this aesthetically pleasing but fairly annoying to put on a shelf horizontal format. It describes itself as a streamlined adventure game that combines the best mechanics and principles of D&D 5th Edition, the OSR and modern game design, with many core mechanics pared down, modified, or expanded upon to create a coherently gritty, resource-focused, roguelike old-school experience. It is a game about tough decisions, risk versus reward, and making smart choices. I would also like to thank my gaming buddy Old Scouser Roleplaying for donating a spare copy he had to me for this review. Also, it is worth mentioning before we begin that I'm by no means an expert on the rules of D&D 5th Edition. Right, to the cover. Here we have a really good piece by Per Fulmer, which actually does a great job of demonstrating the aesthetic of the game, and an excellent logo by Sam Mamelli, which has the peak of the H making a torch. Okay, to the inside. After the list of credits and index, we move on to a simple question. What is this? Here it gives 5 Torches Deep's mission statement, that of it being D&D 5th Edition stripped to its skeleton and then fleshed out with OSR elements and sensibilities in order to provide an old school experience. The question of why is answered by saying that 5 Torches Deep is designed as an introduction to the principles of the OSR. It then moves on to a quick primer of what you get. 5 Torches Deep is based on the core mechanic of 5th Edition, including advantage and disadvantage, has 4 OSR related classes and races, there are race and class restrictions, the same game stats as 5th Edition which incorporates ability limits and ascending AC and rolled abilities and hit points. It has a reduced and simplified skill system and magic has been retooled and flattened. Spells can now cause magical mishaps and the general mathematics are compatible with both 5th Edition and BX. Load and encumbrance are now a proper factor to consider. Rest and healing are now slower and weaker, and equipment can be broken, and there are rules for retainers. Additionally, it reintroduces a simplified morale and reaction system. It also talks about the key principles of the OSR, that being that danger is real, cunning will always trump crunch, magic is haphazard, and travel and resources are a genuine consideration. In 5 Torches Deep, PCs are weaker, the default DC is 11, there are no dump stats, and a few new mechanics have been added in. We then move on to the core mechanic itself. As per 5th Edition, it is a simple D20 plus modifier compared against the DC. Advantage and disadvantage are used and only a single roll is permitted unless circumstances drastically change. It covers DCs and check modifiers and gives us a little example of play to get you in the mood. After this it moves on to player characters, accompanied by this excellent double-page spread of art. In 5 Torches Deep there are 4 playable races, human, dwarf, elf and halfling, and each have 6 ability scores as per the normal 5th Edition. Levelling up is as you would expect, with levels 1 to 3 being compared to 5th Edition, whereas levels 4 to 9 are more comparable to BX. The races have class restrictions based on their stats. In each case, the stat most associated with the class is required at 13+. We have the usual scores and modifiers table you would expect. XP in 5 Torches Deep is for each GP of treasures safely captured. It can also be given for valuable things such as bounties, esoteric knowledge and the like. Character levels only go up to 9. While this may be a controversial take, the reasoning is that it keeps the players weaker and hungrier than they would expect and ensure that they continue raiding dungeons and the like rather than getting involved in domain level play. Additionally, the mathematics make sense up to this point. As we know from previous editions, D&D tends to fall to bits at higher level play, and this is an attempt to prevent this, and if we're all honest, the best levels to play D&D are levels 1 to 9. I think it's a good call. We then move on to the classes. There are 4 classes and they are designed so that you start with a basic class at first level, then specialise at level 3 to one of the listed archetypes, at which point they gain the proficiencies of the archetype and get to pick one of the archetype benefits, and then a second one at level 7, as well as the benefits of the base class. First up is the warrior. This is precisely what you would expect with weapons, armour and multiple attacks. There are 3 archetypes: barbarian, which is the typical enduring, quick and fearless class; the fighter, which is more in relation to a soldier with proficiency in engineering and diplomacy; and the ranger, which is your typical outdoors type. Next is the thief class, who are the stealthy, lightly armoured deceptive types, and has 3 archetypes. They are the assassin, the backstabbing poison users who are great at disguising and infiltrating; the bard, which is pretty much what you would expect; and the rogue, who are the trap disarming, lock-picking kind. After this is the zealot, the base class for those who enjoy playing followers of the divine. The 3 archetypes are the cleric, the classic divine healer and smiter of undead; the Druid, which is just like you think it'll be, and the Paladin, which is pretty much expected, except that they now have the ability to auto-detect lies, which I think could be game damaging in the right or indeed wrong hands. Next is the Mage class. These are the basic arcane spellcaster you would expect, and the archetypes are the Sorcerer, those with innate magical ability who have multiple resistances, the Warlock, those who gain their magical ability by bargaining with powerful beings. These can wear light armour, have dark sight, and perhaps strangely, no need to eat. The final archetype is the Wizard. These have a limited mastery over magic and magical items and can have a familiar. It's worth pointing out that notable in its absence is a variant on the 5th edition Monk. The next section, which greets us with another double-page spread, is equipment. Here we see that much of what is contained within 5th edition has been pared back considerably. We have 4 types of armour: none, shield, light and heavy, and weapons are similarly broken down to many of the very basics. All weapons do a single die of damage that is modified by an ability score, and all have a martial, simple and ranged melee descriptor, as well as a type: piercing, slashing, bludgeoning, etc. Encumbrance is a feature of 5 torches deep, with each thing the size of a human head, or 5 pounds in weight, equaling 1 load. A character can carry 1 load per point of strength. Each point of encumbrance over your strength reduces movement by 5 foot and gives disadvantage on all checks. Magic items similarly receive the pared down treatment. A PC can only equip a number of items equal to their charisma modifier with a minimum of 1. Some require attunement and they won't function without this. We then have the resource management of supply, or SUP. Players have to plan ahead and manage what they might need to bring with them. SUP is equal to the int score, and it goes down each time expendable items are used. You will need to forage or cannibalise items like this in order to replenish your stock. There are some simple rules on foraging. 5 SUP equals 1 load, and we have a table of typical replenishables along with their SUP cost. The next resource management is durability and sundering. Equipment in 5 torches deep has a durability rating of 1 to 5, with the higher number being the more durable goods. When items are used as part of a check, it could take sundering damage. Shields can trade their hit point damage for sundering damage. Criticals reduce the durability by 1, and at 0 it breaks. Items can of course be repaired, with the exception of 0 durability. Proper tools will yield better results. There are also some basic rules around crafting items. The next section, preceded by another double-page spread, is gameplay. This covers the how you do a thing rules. A saving throw is a check with appropriate modifiers that can have advantage and disadvantage, and the 5th edition skills no longer exist. PCs have proficient checks that are governed by their class and archetype. The combat round consists of the character having a turn to describe their actions. They only have 1 active action in a turn, though force checks against them don't use up this action. Actions are as per 5th edition, with an active one such as attack, stealth or spellcast, a movement action and a quick action. An active action can always be traded down to one of the other 2. Movement and combat can be split to allow someone to, for example, run, attack and run, and initiative is governed by dex scores. No modifiers or anything like that, just flat dex. It covers combat positioning and reiterates the point that player cleverness and good choices should be rewarded with things like advantage or even automatic successes. Melee and ranged attacks use both strength and dex respectively as modifiers, and ranged attacks can be made within melee at disadvantage. Criticals are double damage on a natural 20 for everyone, with a 1 being double damage on a check that would damage a PC. As you can see, fairly close to 5th edition. Death and injury are dealt with fairly differently in 5 torches deep. 0 hit points equals death if they are not stabilised within 1 minute. When they are stabilised, they roll on the injury table, which can result in death, disfiguration, the loss of limbs, or on a lucky roll, standing up with D8 hit points restored. There are no negative hit points in 5 torches deep. Healing is much more slow, with 1 hit point per level being restored per night of safe rest. In an unsafe place, it's a solitary hit point. Magic and medicine can restore hit points, with mundane healing only removing penalties to ability scores. Bed rest similarly heals this. Next, we move on to morale. This has not been included in D&D since AD&D, with some people loving it and others hating it. Personally, I don't think I ever used it. However, it was far more complex than what is presented here, with an absolute raft of modifiers. It's a simple fight or flight mechanism for judging if and when enemies flee combat. PCs rarely have to roll for it. It is a D20 modified by wisdom, proficiency bonus and monster morale bonus, which is based on the monster's hit dice. Circumstances can dictate advantage or disadvantage, and it can be checked at various points in a battle. PCs always roll individually, never as a group. After this we have a little on traps, where it stresses the need to the GM to forewarn about traps with narrative cues, and then moves on to the primary source of XP for players, treasure. The monetary system is a simple copper, silver, gold, and carried money uses up load. Also, magic items grant XP equal to their value. Travel is done in turns that are an hour long. Potential events are illustrated on this table here, with the GM being encouraged to be creative and logical, tying them to the task at hand. Overland travel can be done at the rate of 10 plus strength modifier miles per day, with dim light and darkness counting as difficult terrain and harsh terrain respectively. Tactical movement reduces speed by a quarter, stealth by half, and harsh weather such as snow or desert heat makes it difficult or harsh. The PC's SUP is reduced at an hourly rate accordingly. Over water travel is 3 miles an hour in a boat on smooth waters and 5 miles an hour on a ship at sea. 5 Torches Deep has a travel mechanic called rolling to return. This is the return to a safe camp where PCs can rest and recuperate, with a DC being 10 plus 1 per travel turn to a maximum of 20. A successful roll means that they get back safely, and failure does them damage if it's dangerous, and they lose loads of equipment if it's arduous. This damage received ignores armour and can't be healed or avoided. There is a mechanic for determining time, which I'm not entirely sure needs to be there, and then we move on to light. With the game actually being called 5 Torches Deep, you'd be correct in assuming that light is an important factor. There are 4 levels with it affecting different checks in different environments. Torches last 1 hour, lanterns 3, and various light conditions and what they affect are listed here. The only way to see in the dark without light is dark vision. This takes the form of whatever is most appropriate: earth sense, echolocation, heat sense, or the like. There are some rules on how to run chase scenes and also for retreating, and then we move on to resilience and exhaustion. Each PC has a resilience equal to their con, and this is the number of hours that they can adventure without food or rest. Once they've gone over this resilience period, the GM can cause them to roll for resilience checks, D20 plus con modifier, with the DC being 10 plus the number of hours beyond their resilience. Failure means exhaustion. Exhaustion means disadvantage in all checks and a movement speed of 0. This can only be cured by sufficient rest and recuperation. After this we have corruption. This takes the form of disease, poison and venom, with some rules on how to govern them. The next section is called Magic. Zealots and mages can cast arcane and divine spells. Spellcasting requires a casting check, 1 free hand and components. The DC to cast a spell is 10 plus the spell's level. Failure results in a mishap from this table here. With player level only going up to 9, we have the spell's known table. Cantrips in 5 Torches Deep are incapable of directly doing damage, and a spellcaster can cast 3. These never require spellcasting checks, components or the like. A spell can be cast as a rite, which takes 1 hour per spell level, but means the spell doesn't need a check. It covers potions and converting spells, and how all the spells that target an enemy are treated as an attack. It also touches on magic items, stating that they cannot be used as intended until they are identified, and it also touches on the slight differences of scrolls and wands in 5 Torches Deep. Spell focuses such as orbs or staffs are mentioned, stating that they may remove the need for certain components. We then move on to the spell lists. There is Arcane and Divine, and each spell level has just 5 spells, many of which are slightly reworked and renamed versions of those in 5th edition. In my opinion, they're a bit of a mixed bag of selection, though you're bound to find something to your liking. The next section, again preceded by a double-page spread, is NPCs and monsters. It covers the difference between retainers and henchmen and about how players use tests to give orders. Hirelings and the like are important in 5 Torches Deep due to the weaker state of PCs. There is also Renown as a mechanism, which is equal to the PC's highest ability modifier plus their level. NPCs will test against this to see if they've heard of the characters and react accordingly. There is also a small rule on NPC reactions. After this we have monsters. There is a table called Monster Math, which gives you the numbers for creating your own monsters based on the level of the party, and then we move on to monster categories, the likes of brutes, leaders, snipers, and what their strengths and weaknesses are. There's also a small list of monster techniques, which gives monsters special abilities that they can use and how they're implemented in the game, as well as how monsters deploy tactics based on their party composition. There's also a section on converting monsters. We then move on to alignment. In 5 Torches Deep, alignment is largely ignored. However, evil with a capital E is noted as being a literal manifestation of cruelty, corruption and sadism. Genuinely evil creatures are demons, devils, necromancers, undead and aberrations alongside their thralls. Otherwise, alignment is a relatively irrelevant concept. The next section gives some rules on building monsters, with the concept, threat, category and techniques finalised in the Monster Math, and it gives us 6 example monsters. We then move on to our final double-page spread, which heralds running the game. The first bit is around the kind of things the GM should be holding as considerations, things like the framework and how preparation should go, and then we move on to the principles of Five Torches Deep, that being that a fair challenge is always presented, described as even brutally fair to a fault, and that ingenuity should be rewarded. PC's choices should have a real drive and meaning in the game, and that there is no right answer or single solution. The world should have an internal consistency, fundamental truths that have meaning when they are broken, and that discovery should be a driving factor, with exploration and navigation being the key to the game. Also, the GM should facilitate play, stepping in as a social arbiter to resolve issues. The final section is called Generator. This is where a GM can generate an adventure or landmark by rolling a d12 3 times on this table to generate a connection, and this table where you roll d20 one or more times to find something descriptive. There is also a section on random maps that are generated by using a d6. After this, we have some quick reference tables, and finally, a character sheet. At just 48 pages, Five Torches Deep, perhaps surprisingly, accomplishes a lot of what it intends. It absolutely provides 5th Ed players with an experience more akin to those who enjoy the perceived unforgivingness of the OSR, within a framework that they can easily understand. And with the depowered characters, meagre healing, damage to equipment, exhaustion and replenishment of consumables being at the forefront of their minds, it accomplishes what it sets out to do. I do, however, feel that there are a few missteps along the way. The main driving force behind Five Torches Deep appears to not only provide an OSR experience for 5th Ed players, but also to trim away some of the number crunching. However, in some respects, with the introduction of exhaustion, sundering, equipment damage and resource tracking, they just remove something and replace it with something else. The inclusion of the morale rules is slightly puzzling to me, as it stresses the importance of an authentic experience for the players, but then makes the running away of a monster come down to a potentially fluffed die roll. And the idea that PCs will almost never have to roll morale, meaning that they potentially could, seems to give mixed messages in regard to the player agency that the game purports. Also, I don't know a single person who missed the morale rules from previous editions, as most seem to ignore them and make a decision as a GM on the spot as to whether enemies run or fight. I played AD&D to death back in the day and never once used the morale rules. Indeed, Wizards of the Coast haven't ever included them since taking over TSR, though I can perhaps understand that their inclusion here is a way of demonstrating how things used to be done. Spellcasting seems equally dubiously changed in some ways, as the disappointment from your first level character casting their one spell per day, having it fail due to a poor casting roll, doesn't bear thinking about, and something I think would affect the enjoyment of the player. And the inclusion of only 5 spells per level, without some of the renamed ones being amongst the best in D&D, is a bit puzzling, and also a bit on the mean side. It's worth mentioning also that divine spellcasting has no way of raising the dead anymore, which makes it more akin to Lamentations of the Flame Princess than the original D&D in my eyes. The level limit being set at 9 seems a bit lacking initially, but I completely understand the logic behind it, as usually from 10th level and above in most D&D campaigns the players stop the dungeon crawling aspect of the game and move on to bigger, more world affecting things, the likes of securing realms and journeying to other planes. One thing I did like was the clarification of alignment, and the nature of true evil is a definite win for this game, and a truth that D&D has skirted around for quite some time. The organisation of the classes works for the most part, but the removal of the monk to create the assassin class seems a little bit of an odd take, as some of the abilities the assassin has could easily have been worked into the rogue archetype, and I mean, should players be really playing assassins anyway? I understand that the AC progression of monks could have been troublesome, however, a possibility in my eyes was that a rework of the mystic class might have been a better choice, though I do understand that this is BECME and not BX, and has only been playtest material for Wizards of the Coast for 5th edition. This is of course just my opinion, and I'm sure there is a whole plethora of mathematical and gameplay reasons as to why this was not the case that I'm ignorant to. Your Five Torches Deep may vary. Another thing I found a bit puzzling was the inclusion of only 6 monsters. I would hope that the authors produced a companion volume to expand on this and the spells at some point in the future. In my experience, the most enjoyable time to play D&D has always been levels 1 to 9, and this is clearly something the authors have considered. Five Torches Deep doesn't feel like a complete game to me, but it has definitely opened the doors of possibility to those who have a craving for what is presented here, and it's definitely a step in the right direction. I think those with that kind of craving will really enjoy the changes suggested here. D&D has a reputation of creating characters that are more akin to superheroes than fantasy tropes, and at times it seems like they're altogether impossible to kill, but Five Torches Deep addresses this with a sense of poise. It's a well put together package which is available for $20 with a free PDF that has nice art, though a little more scattered throughout wouldn't have gone amiss, and it's incredibly easy to read, which is very much to its credit. I sat and absorbed it in an hour, or 1 torch if you will, and a lot can be learned from Five Torches Deep on how to make a book readable, concise, approachable and thought-provoking. I give it an 8 out of 10. If you enjoyed this review, please make sure to hit the thumbs up, subscribe to my channel and check out my other videos. Also, if you're interested in buying this product, I've put some links below. Lastly, if you like what I produce here, then maybe think about supporting me on Patreon. Bud out.